Thank you very much, John. So, Kalimera, Melene Jelabena Heinacha, and I would like to start by saying thank you, Escharisto, to our Greek friends, to John and Mary, who are great hosts and who organized a wonderful conference. So let me start immediately, and you see it's an impressive panel here. 8 panelists. I never had that before. It will be quite a challenge, but we will manage it. I'm optimist. I would actually start by introducing the panelists, and I start with the 2 ladies. So let me start with Lida Kondoyani. She is Corporate Governance Director of Mytilenios, and she told me that we just saw a video from her company. It's a large listed Greek company, and she is an experienced corporate governance expert. And on my left side, you see Saskia Slomp. She is the CEO of EFRAG, the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group. Everyone of you knows EFRAG now because they have this ongoing consultation on the sustainability reporting standards. So we will listen carefully to what she has to tell us about these standards. Then I would like to introduce Fabrice de Marigny. Where is he? There. Okay. He's the Global Head of Financial Advisory Services and Capital Market Activities at Mazars. Also very experienced. He also worked for 11 years at the AMF. Then we are very pleased to welcome Sven Gentner, who is Head of Unit Corporate Reporting, Audit and Credit Rating Agencies at the EU Commission. So very welcome, Sven. We then have Lefteris Anastasakis. I'll try it because it's difficult for me. Okay, great. I'm very glad. He's the CEO of Priority, which is an ESG consultancy firm from Greece. And then we also would like to say a welcome to Mike Suffield. He is a Director of Professional Insights of ACCA. ACCA is the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. And we also would like to welcome Lee White. He's the Executive Director of the IFRS Foundation. And then, of course, we automatically think of the ISSB standards. And again, we already have the consultation on the table. And of course, we will all have a deep look in the standards, and we will give our comments, that's for sure. So did I forget anyone? No, Ben, sorry. My best colleague, I forgot about him. So Ben Granger, he's the CEO of the Individual Investors Federation of Belgium, the VFB, and he's a very active member of Better Finance. So thank you very much for all of you, and thank you to the audience for your patience. And I would like to have an active discussion, which means we will have the first round with some opening statements. And then I would love to also have your questions, to have an exchange. Otherwise, we will have to ask our own questions, but it's always good to have some input from the audience. So let me start just with a brief introduction. In 2021, the European Commission adopted a proposal for a corporate sustainability reporting directive, the CSRD, with view on establishing EU sustainability reporting standards and promote better sustainability disclosures from companies. Investors and policymakers alike, we all need understandable and comparable information on corporate sustainability matters in order to evaluate the non-financial performance of the companies and encourage those companies to develop a responsible approach to business. Now, how can non-financial reporting contribute to increased investor protection and also ensure that individual investors have access to the necessary information to make informed choices based on their sustainability information and preferences. Well, I think that's the key question this whole panel is about. And if a decade ago, sustainability and responsible investing were a trend pursued by certain issuers, investors, today we have to realize that they form an integral part of financial markets. Many issuers of financial instruments aim to be sustainable and that's probably new, individual retail investors show a strong preference for instruments that are sustainable. So far, this means that the products either deliver an impact, do no harm, or contribute positively to ESG considerations. So as we speak about investments, we must speak about sustainability. Therefore, it requires standardization to reduce market frictions and ensure investor protection. Today, we wish to explore the 4 vantage points of corporate sustainability reporting. That is, first of all, that of the issuers and investors, that of regulators and supervisors, that of reporting standards setting bodies, and finally, that of auditors. I think we should start the whole discussion with an opening statement of each of the members of the panel. And the main question to all of you is, what is, in your view, the advantage of sustainability reporting standards? Why do we need them? And I would like to ask all the panelists to stick to maximum 3 minutes. When that's good, when you have your opening statement. And actually, I would start from the very left, Ben, with you, and then just go all the row on this wonderful table here. So please, the floor is yours, Ben.
Thank you, Jella. Aha. So as you said, why is sustainability reporting standards interesting for the end investor? Simply because we want to know what we are talking about. And today it is sometimes hard to know what you are buying because everybody uses terminology and we don't know if we are meaning the same thing by using the same term. So we are, when you express a preference to your advisor or banker to invest in a certain way, their responsibility lies in the suitability, in the, I would say, integration of your preference into your portfolio. And we are not sure if that is always happening, for the simple reason that there is no governance or oversight today. And if it goes wrong, there is at this point no possibility for redress. So clearly, to us, it's important to know that when we do not get what we want, we have a way to complain about it because we like complaining. The lack of transparency also leads to a certain distrust of labels. When you go to the store and you buy butter and every butter has a green sticker to say this is a sustainably, locally sourced, whatever it may be, nobody believes it anymore because every cup of every brand has the same sticker or a different sticker. So the need for definition, what exactly is what, for harmonization, let's all use a level playing field and talk about the same thing, transparency and clear communication. And I keep hammering on this point, clear communication. Let's keep it simple. Most people, it's an atrocity that I don't want to be a part of, but more and more I find that either I'm getting older or I'm getting smarter, but I have to agree with Jean-Paul Servet, or maybe Jean-Paul Servet is getting younger by working with all these young kids. But what he said this morning rings very true. We need harmonization. We need partnership. We are not at odds with each other. We are not fighting. We're all working towards the same objective. The issue here, it's the weakness, it's the implementation. When there is no regulatory framework, then logically everybody just makes up their own framework. There are some 20 odd labels for sustainable investing. Who knows which one is the right one, which one is the true one? So I think it's very clear today. I'm very happy. The work by EFRAG, by ESMA, by Better Finance, it shows us the way. We are partners in this endeavor. And our only thing is we do not wish to abandon the scientific logic behind all this in favor of certain political sensitivities. We hope that this is going to be a framework that everybody can believe in, trust in, understand. Thank you.
Perfect, then, if I allow.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon, and I will keep my comments brief as well, but I do want to thank the Hellenic Investors Association and Better Finance for the invitation to speak here on this panel. So how did we as the IFRS Foundation get to be sitting here and talking about this today? That's a story that really started sort of in 2020 and in 2021, and there were some formal and informal consultations that the IFRS Foundation undertook, and I'll talk about those a little bit more, because some of what we just heard from Ben really was very much at the heart of the types of responses we heard to our consultations. But if you're not familiar with the IFRS Foundation, it's an organisation that inside it we have what's known as the IASB. I apologise, there are so many acronyms in what I'm sharing, but that board is the one that produces the IFRS financial reporting standards, which are used in more than 140 countries around the globe. So our consultations in 2020 and 2021, really, we weren't looking to do this work. We were ready to serve. And in the responses we received to the consultations was very broad support, very strong support, I should say, first of all, for a global set of sustainability standards. But secondly, there was broad support for the IFRS Foundation to set up the ISSB. And why is that the case? Well, for a number of reasons, but there was certainly recognition around the governance structures that were already in place. And that's a three-layered from standard setting board to trustees to the monitoring board that oversights the work of the IFRS Foundation, of which Jean-Paul Sauvé is actually the chair of the monitoring board. So there was the sentiment that the governance was well tested and well known for another global standard setting board. The other that people recognised was around the quality of process, and we might talk about this a little bit further, because there's this really fine balance we're trying to do, which is to move ahead at pace with standard setting, which lots of people are demanding to occur, but balancing that with the level of rigour through due process, where people say everyone needs an opportunity to consult and provide input onto these types of standards. And thirdly was a sense that there needed to be connectivity between what was being produced by corporates in terms of their financial statements, or the narrative that comes from the financial statements, and what would start to become from the sustainability report. And if you took Ben's comments earlier, there is a global desire for consistency of how this information is reported. There's a global desire for there to be transparency. And so if we can play this role through a global baseline, then we think we've met the needs, particularly of the global investor community, which will be the focus for the ISSB.
Yeah. No, it's perfect.
It's my schedule.
No, it's wonderful.
Because I'm very bad in respecting time, so I want to
go ahead.
I put start, otherwise it's not working. So yes, I would like to thank as well Better Finance and the Hellenic Investor Association to allow EFRAG to say a few things here. So you asked what are the advantages of standard setting in the sustainability domain. I'm going to use the words what a colleague is saying. You need to walk on two legs, so you have to provide a full picture of the company. So the one leg is the financial reporting, and both the IFRS Foundation and EFRAG are known for that. But although we get more famous nowadays, if I use the word EFRAG, they say, oh, from all these exposure drafts, these 13 exposure drafts. So times change quickly. So it's really important to present a full picture. I think Ben already mentioned the most important words: comparability and transparency, which is, of course, very important. Reporting is a tool. It's a tool to show what the behavior is and to influence in a way the behavior, to show what goes good and what is not going good. So as such, it's not changing the behavior, but it's important that it exists, and it's important that it's comparable. I mean, companies have to report on a lot of items. There is a lot of data information required by all kinds of directives and so on. So it's very important that they don't have to do, I don't know how many checklists and things and so on. So there is where comparability and transparency comes. I have still a few times. So at EFRAG, well, I don't know how well known EFRAG is in Greece here. So we are actually 20 years old. We have nearly become adult, and that's probably where the Commission gives us a further task, further responsibilities. Without doubt, Sven will refer to the proposal for a CSRD, where EFRAG has been identified as the technical advisor, and to the Commission to prepare draft sustainability reporting standards. And for us, we have all the experience like we have in financial reporting, but we also have a bit of experience in the sustainability area, where we started in 2018 with our lab. We may have, if we have time, come back to that. But in looking for good practice examples in this lab, we could see that there were many differences and many needs for improvement. So there's really a strong need for more transparency and better comparability to make this work also in the sustainability area. And we know we are in a world now where so many things are happening and everybody is recognizing the importance for change, climate change, other change, biodiversity. So reporting is a tool, at least, that can make this visible. And we are glad in EFRAG that we can play a little role in that. Thank you.
Perfect. That was exactly 3 minutes. So, Lee, I think I give you mine.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jelle. Thank you. It was sort of very interesting to listen to Ben and Saskia. Ben talking about terminology, definition, harmonization, and Saskia talking about reporting as being a tool, but does not promote behavior. Okay, so that's how I was about to start, saying that the CSRD is a reporting tool, and it's just that. It's nothing more than that, and that does not mean that investors will be in a better case, especially private investors, retail investors, and they're going to be in a better place to understand sustainability and what is the impact of sustainability matters on the environment, on society, but also on companies themselves. So we would expect that with the CSRD, with the reporting, two things would be served, both the users and the preparers of information. And on one hand, we do understand that there is a growing need for and expectations of stakeholders for more transparency, more communication on the business activities, and then the impact those activities have on environment and society. I skip governance for the moment because I think governance is a bit overshadowed by environment and the ENDS, environment and society and social impact. So I'll leave that aside. So I'll stick to the environment and society. And I understand the need for providing adequate public information on the risk of sustainability to the companies, and investors need to understand, of course, those risks. But on the other hand, you've got the issuers, you've got the companies, and we're not talking just about listed companies, we're talking about non-listed companies, which have so far had probably less reporting obligations. So you've got listed companies on one side, and they are faced in a situation which reporting to them is quite problematic. And the reason is quite problematic is because there's an increasing demand for information. That demand comes from different stakeholders, and there is a large number of private standard frameworks. So this is what companies have to face. And on the other hand, it's understandable that stakeholders, shareholders and stakeholders tend to prefer detailed and comprehensive reporting requirement. So definitely it seems that there is a need, we all agree on that there is a need for clearer and more coherent reporting obligations at EU level. And in particular, given the multitude of existing and forthcoming reporting obligations scattered across different frameworks, which again, in turn, is going to create complexity and confusion for companies. So a consistent approach across different pieces of legislation is equally important for preparers, the companies of information. And we should not forget at this conversation that the need for streamlining reporting requirements at EU level, and IFRAG is trying to do something, is putting a lot of effort on that, but I must stress that new EU framework, because there are other frameworks which companies use so far, should build on and should be consistent with international standard setting initiatives. So, and last but not least, we should not forget in this, the Commission should not forget in this whole conversation, new coming pieces of legislation like taxonomy, like the corporate governance due diligence directive, etc., etc. So I think I'll stop here and thank you very much for the input.
Thank you, Lita.
Thank you very much. I think much of what I'm going to say is going to be consistent with what you've already heard from the other panel members. For those of you who don't know, ACCA, who I represent, we're a global professional accountancy body with over 240,000 members worldwide and 500,000 students. And we have around about 65,000 members in the EU. So the development of the CSRD is a really important issue for us to be focusing upon. I think recent years have taught us just how interdependent the relationships between businesses, society, and the planet actually are. So the physical effects of climate change, they can and they do affect our financial capital. And the changes that we make to our operations to respond to financial pressures lead to environmental, human capital, and social impacts. So in order to survive for the long term, business leaders need to understand that feedback loop between the value that the business creates for itself and the impact that it has on society and the planet. And at ACCA, we feel very strongly that professional accountants in business and in practice have got a critical role to play in placing sustainability at the heart of decision making. And we think this reporting development is actually about decision making, and that's why we very much support the leadership both of the EU and indeed of the IFRS Foundation in promoting the adoption of sustainable business models and standards. All of this work is happening at an unprecedented pace, which is fantastic. We're really trying to catch up, I think, on stuff that perhaps should have been done a long time ago. So that urgency is absolutely right. We need to make sure, though, that urgency is not at the cost of getting things right. So I think we need to get the balance right between speed and getting the standards as effective as they possibly can be. And to echo one of the points that's just been made, we think it's really important to have a focus on global consistency. So from an EU perspective, the more that the standards being developed here can be consistent and interoperable with what's happening globally with ISSB standards, the better from our point of view, not just in terms of concepts, but in terms of definitions and classifications. And there's something there also, I think, about being aware of proportionality and cost benefit in all of this for all the parties that are going to be involved. Just briefly to say something about assurance too. So this information is going to be vitally important and we want it to be trusted information, and therefore assurance work on that information is going to be very important. And that's a big debate that's happening certainly in Europe at the moment about how that sustainability assurance should work. There's going to be a great demand for that kind of work, and I think a whole new market potentially for new providers. But we're also very keen to make sure that existing statutory auditors get the opportunity to play in this area. They already work to familiar standards of auditing and a framework. They're bound by professional code of ethics, and they're able to connect financial reporting and non-financial reporting. So just to summarize, I think in the coming years, everyone's going to have to step up. There's a really big skills issue in all of this. Auditors, preparers, business leaders, regulators, we're all going to need to upskill in order to meet these challenges. And that's a really important role for ACCA as a professional accountancy organisation, which hopefully I'll talk a bit more about later on.
Thank you, Mike. Sven, we're curious to find out what you say on the top.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. So the question is, why do we need sustainability reporting standards? I think my reply would be that we as societies and economies have made lots of mistakes over the last decades. If we hadn't made lots of mistakes, we wouldn't be where we are. We wouldn't be in a climate crisis. We wouldn't be in a biodiversity crisis. We wouldn't be in a water crisis. We wouldn't be in lots of other crises as well. So something doesn't work. Markets didn't properly work. Markets didn't have the proper information. Maybe they had the wrong incentives. Whatever it was, we need to fix it and we need to change it. And we need to see lots of change over the coming years. And I think that's where these standards and lots of other initiatives come in. We need to provide the right information to the markets, to the investors, to understand which activities are actually sustainable and which will also be beneficial economically in future, and which activities are not. And that's a huge task in which we've been active as a European Commission and many other bodies as well over the last few years. The corporate sustainability standards that we're talking about today, I think, play a key role here, because if you want, that's the origin of all the information that feeds into the financial markets. It's the corporates that need to explain what they are doing, how they're active, what impacts their activities have, what risks they face with their activities. And then it's for the markets and the banks and the institutional investors and the asset manager of this world to take the right decisions and invest in those activities that are actually will contribute to a more sustainable economy in the future. So it sounds all very technical, what we're discussing today, but in the end, I think it's a piece of a solution to a really, really important and pressing real world problem. And I think that's also, and that's my last remark, that's also why we're doing this with such high speed, because there's simply not a lot of time left. I mean, we just need to look at the weather forecast for the weekend, and we know why we need to deal with this now and not in a few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Sven, for this high-speed statement. Fabrice, I think the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And let me also thank the Hellenic Investor Association and Better Finance for this invitation. And we are, as an audit firm, more than happy to sponsor this kind of events, because investor protection, I would say, it's and proper information is our day-to-day work. Or to make it short, you are not our clients, but we work for you. And that's the public good and the well-functioning of the markets. Now, to answer your question, and I would like very much to follow up on the comments of Sven, and if you allow me to put for 1 minute another hat, which is I've been chairing a group to design for the ECOFIN the next CMU, and that makes the link with the discussion this morning. And we suggested to rename the CMU and to call it Savings and Sustainable Investment Union. That, for other reasons, did not went through, but the whole idea was really to make clear that the transition to a more sustainable economy will take time and will require a lot of investments. And the public money will not be able to do it anymore, especially post-COVID, where member states have used all their indebtedness capacity. So it's really channeling to long-term projects and investment opportunities, because that's what it will be, savings to help private money to help that transition to a more sustainable economy. Taxonomy creates the need to select investments according to certain criteria, but it can only work if investors have a proper understanding of where they invest. And that's, I'm just echoing what was said before, that reliable, comparable, high quality information, it's the minimum required to allow investment decisions, and especially proper allocation of capital. Greenwashing does not permit proper allocation of capital, let's put things clearly. And if investors will wish to invest in the best opportunities, and issuers or project innovators for the transition wants to benefit for long-term investments, that information creates the bridge. That's what the CSRD does, and it can only work if you have a proper understanding through standardized approach that are comparable over time and between sector to happen. And again, being very macro, I think we have to really understand and measure that society has changed. And I can illustrate that in our day-to-day functioning. As a service firm, our raw material is brains, it's talent. And we have to attract the best talents. That's what we do. And we try to do. And the expectations of the new generations have completely changed. They are not just deciding on remuneration. Of course, remuneration plays a role, but it's not the only questions they ask you as an employer. It's your values, the purpose of what you do, the ethics. What is your reaction vis-a-vis Ukraine and the war? And you have to demonstrate that you have a purpose, that they will come here to serve a purpose, and that it plays a key role. And this information will not only be for investors, it will be for all kinds of stakeholders, including recruiting talent. Sorry for this general statement. I'm happy to come into the discussion to more practical aspects as an audit firm, and why information needs to be of quality, why it needs to be consistent, why it needs to be meaningful. But I wanted to recall this because it really explains why we are spending time here.
Thank you, Fabrice. So last but not least, Lefteris, please.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's really a challenge for me now to speak in English, first of all, and to trying to say something new after 7 top professionals, top regulators have exhausted on the issue. So, as our chairperson said, I am working in a consultancy firm of 90 professionals, 90, specialized in compliance issues. But I was not born a consultant. I was born actually a cement person. I worked 25 years in the cement industry, in the biggest cement industry in Greece. And I also participated in the European Cement Association SEM Bureau, and also in the Global Cement Sustainability Initiative, because we used to call what we call today ESG, which is a very sexy term. We used to call it sustainability or CSR, company social responsibility. So I prepared a few slides. The first is totally useless because you have already said everything, but I am going to show you the next slide. It's maybe you don't see the letters because they are too small, but the case is that suppose that you are a sustainability officer, sustainability manager, a CSR director, an ESG director, you name it, in a cement company or in a bank or in an insurance company or in an event maker company or even in a law company. So this is the regulation and the legal framework you have to face. You have to pick in which of these regulations you try to match. It's impossible. No, you should have a second accounting department bigger than the financial accounting department in your cement company, just to try to cope with a few of these. So no one is more happy for the work is done in the European community, in the European Union, with all the aid of these professionals than the companies that have to deal with ESG. And also the second happiest person in the room or in the continent, in Europe, I mean, are the consultants, because now they will have actually a common framework to deal with. Because until now, you have to deal with all of this. And you have to pick whether you want to comply with GRI or you want to comply with some of the ISOs involved, or with SA 8000, or you name it. So it's a great leap forward, and we are very happy to be on the right track, and we're really anxious to see the European directive, which, as usual, will be the light for the rest of the globe to comply with. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the panel. I mean, I really like the high discipline of the panelists. So I'm glad that Saskia has the timing here. So I think we should go into the second round of questions. But if there are questions in the audience, we would be pleased to take them. So do we have a microphone, by the way?
Of course we have here.
Great. Thank you. There's one question from Jean Medanach and one from our friend from Austria.
Where?
There, in the back. Yeah.
Thank you. Jean Medanach from the Luxembourg Investor Association. So I have two comments or two questions to the panel. One is, a hot topic right now is the topic of greenwashing. We're seeing so much greenwashing in environmental reporting. I heard that some of the panelists said there need to be some auditing assurance work around this. I would like to hear this perhaps from all the panelists or from some members, if they agree that there's a need for auditing of these standards. We need to have that at the beginning because there's a lot of cheating in this area. My second question is, I think we in Europe, we are much more advanced than our friends in America, that the people in Asia. So, and there are many reporting frameworks for non-financial reporting. So we need to have, I think we need to have a single global standard. I think it's good the European Commission is taking some lead. That IFRS Foundation is involved with some global work, but we don't need another 5 corporate sustainability reporting standards. I think we need one globally, which makes life easier for companies and which makes life easier for investors, that we can understand, yes or no, this is a global sustainability reporting standard. So this is what the companies have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. I think we collect questions first and then we answer them together. So if we could have the microphone for Florian, please.
Yeah, hello, Florian Beckermann, Austrian Shareholder Association. I have 3 very simple questions. The first one is, I catched up the word human resources, and there are sitting a lot of young people here. Maybe some advice from the panel. What's the right education to get into the sustainability business field? The second question is much more complex. You know, all of yours, you know, that there was the idea of having a kind of ESG rating agency in Europe. Maybe you can give us your thoughts about it. And the third very simple question is, maybe it's a little bit provocative, but we see on the market right now that all the non-financial reporting is validated by Big Four. Is that creation, does this create more trust? That's all, thank you.
Any further questions? Yes, we have.
Hello, I'm George Dimitriou. I'm Vice President of Fast Finance, a small investment firm. And also I'm a member of the board of directors of Hellas as well. My question is simple, but it refers to many small investment firms in Greece and probably in the periphery of Europe that it's a burden, this need, actually not need, this obligation to fulfill some compliance reports and all this bureaucracy that is addressed to the investment industry. My question mainly is for small businesses, since I belong to a small business, and it's a burden in terms of cost and time and human resources that a small firm has to employ in order to complete this fulfillment. And actually, this question should be addressed also in the previous panel, where Mrs. Casanova and Mr. Servet was here. But anyhow, I would like to hear your own comments on this as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, we start with the first answering round. Jean, we start maybe with your comment on the greenwashing and the need for auditing. I think that is a typical question to an auditor. So, Fabrice, do you feel that you could answer this question, please?
Thank you. Indeed, I think the need for auditing, actually, if I'm correct, the CSRD starts, there will be a learning process, and it will start by a limited assurance. And after a number of years to be agreed, there will be a reasonable assurance. So, but it's paving the way to an audit at some point. And that very much coincides with this idea that we need quality information. And because companies, they will collect and process internal data on issues that are not their core business or they are not used to in most cases. And to ensure that there are continuity of methods, benchmarking with external information will be needed. In the financial reporting, everything at the end ends up into a monetary figure. That will not be the case with sustainability information. You will have very different things, and that there will be a need to check that it is consistent over time. And I would just say there are three things. Consistency, it's very important in addition to this data quality. And even if the standards, and we are hearing it, are conceived in separate silos, if I compare it to IFRS and the standards for sustainability, at the end, the information disclosed by the company, it's the same reality, but seen from two different angles. So there is a need of consistency, and that's the company creating that reconciliation from different measurements. And the role of the auditor is to make sure that that consistency exists and it fully reflects one reality that you can look through different angles. And finally, and I guess it's part of your question, and remark with the comments about bureaucracy, I think sustainability reporting should help investors to take informed decisions. And for that, they don't need to be overwhelmed of information. Too much information kills the information, but we need to identify what is the meaningful information, which, by the way, sometimes to get a very meaningful information requires a lot of process. So the production of that meaningful information could be a huge process. But from this mass of information that companies will be computing, they will need to help to transform that into proper knowledge and maybe end up into meaningful indicators. Again, it will be a learning process. But again, I think it's difficult today to evaluate compared to financial information and sustainability information, which the legislator wants to be of equal magnitude. It's difficult to know what will count at the end. I think each individual will pay attention to more things than others. But that's why it's very important that there is a common reading of that information. There could be different interpretations. And that's why comparability it's very important. So I would say the three main points when implementing all this would be quality of data, consistency of information, and production of meaningful information for investors.
Thank you, Fabrice. Jean, your second comment was, I take it more as a comment, because I think the majority of us would agree with your comment. The EU is advancing with respect to the sustainable reporting standards, but at the end, the investors and auditors just are looking for one single global standard. And I think that's, in an ideal world, that's what we are all looking for. So I think we would all agree with your comment. Florian, you had three questions. Difficult question, the right education for sustainability business. Who could answer something on that? You, please.
I'll just say a quick word about it. I do think it's a really important issue, because I think skills in all of this will kind of drive the success of these initiatives. I can speak from a finance professional's perspective, and we've certainly been putting a lot of work and effort, as have other accountancy organisations, in building our education offering so that we're making finance professionals who can operate in this environment. So you'll see that the professional qualifications evolve, that syllabuses change, that exams change, and that we're starting to equip our people with the skills that they need. And it's not just getting qualified as an accountant in this case, it's actually what you learn throughout your career and what you need to learn to operate in a changing environment. I also think in this respect, there's something very important about collaboration. So I would see finance professionals working very closely with really heavy experts in different areas of sustainability. So the ability to collaborate, I think, is going to be very important. And that's another skill that we seek to equip our members with. But I think it's a big challenge across all the professions.
Yeah, sure, Ben.
I just wanted to comment what Ms. Leda said earlier on. How does this change the behavior of the end investor? Because that is really the point. And what investors really seek is to make reasoned investment decisions. And any data that helps you make a reasoned investment decision is a good one. And what Natasha Kazanov said earlier today, you need to have this data fit for the audience. So all this technical data isn't really helping us because most of the audience doesn't understand what it means or how it impacts our investment. And so our advice is really to keep it simple, to make sure that the young people, the old people, the left and the right, everybody understands what you're talking about. If you have that, then education becomes easier. And then Mr. Medernach has been around for a long time. He should know that the greenwashing is just the newest form of marketing that we have in the industry. But as you have clarity in what exactly you're talking about, then that sort of goes away by itself.
Okay. Florian, you also you asked for the ESG rating agency. Sven, I'm looking a little bit in your direction. Is that something you could comment?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are lots of questions around these entities and how the markets develop and what kind of needs do we have and who needs to provide what, that the markets function properly. So we as a European Commission, we're currently looking at this market for ESG rating agencies, which exists and which develops very fast. We've actually just concluded a consultation where we've asked stakeholders to provide input, to tell us what works, what doesn't work. Do we need more transparency? Do we need rules on the conduct of this business? Do we need rules around conflict of interest? And I think at the moment we're analyzing the results to this consultation. We've said we'd also conduct an impact assessment, and it might be that the next year we would come with a with a legislative initiative, possibly, on this market. I think the impetus wouldn't be so much to create another agency or a public agency, but rather to make sure that in this market, we have the rules in place that lets it function properly. So that means that everyone who uses these products understands what they buy, what they actually rate, what they can do and what they can't do. And then I think going forward, this can play a very useful role, this kind of service which is being provided to investors and other market participants.
Okay. Yes, sure.
Again, just a small comment, always from the end investor perspective. We feel the rating is not the goal. And too many companies are striving towards the rating. We don't care about the rating. It's just an instrument to help us understand that you're doing the work. And therefore, creating another agency doesn't seem useful to us. I think EFRAG is making the framework in which to report and the way that it will be verified and controlled. And so the auditors will probably align with whatever it is that EFRAG and the European community are going to come up with. And whether it is 1 rating or 20 is irrelevant to us.
Good point. Last question from Florian was the provocative one. And you are probably right. Most of the auditors are from the Big Four. That's why the EU Commission is working on the audit reform. So does this really create the trust that we need? So who would like to answer that question? Fabrice, I look again in your direction.
Sorry,
Sven too.
Okay,
whoever.
I do it shortly.
Yes.
I think, in fact, what is underlying all the questions that we had, it's will we have an efficient ecosystem for financial reporting? For sustainability reporting, able to process, to audit, to disseminate information, to assess that information, to rate it, to benchmark it, to introduce into indices. Will we have that ecosystem in place? And again, if we want this to be of similar magnitude than financial reporting, first one, and it was alluded clearly here, there will be a need for specific expertise. And companies, auditors, rating agencies, supervisors are in the talent war. Let's say, put it very clearly. We are all looking for those talents. And it goes up to revisiting the educational programs of business schools and all that. But then the question is really, will the existing market players, be it audit firms, rating agencies, data disseminators, expand their scope to this new territory that can be done through new recruits or through training? And we are working hard on it, of course. The other possibility is to favor the creation of new players, which the legislation does. Still optional, member state option. I don't know how it will finish, but there is a legal call for more diversification with these independent services assurance providers. But I struggle a little bit with that because of the timing. To create new players with international dimension that can be of equal efficiency and quality takes time. And you could have certificators today that will learn auditing processes, or new companies that will start from scratch, but it will take time. In 2 or 3 years' time, they will never be able to provide those services to major or listed companies. Therefore, and I come to the provocative question, more diversity is needed. And in fact, if you take the categories I was mentioning, audit firms, rating agencies, or data disseminators, actually they are all oligopolies. So for market efficiency, I think purposes, and to make sure that the CSRD efficiently produces quality information, I think there is a need to work on the diversification of those three markets. And actually, between the three, if there is a candidate where that can be done more easily than others, is really the audit market. And we also welcome very much the consultation, the call for evidence, and the statements by Commissioner McGuinness that wants to really review that framework in the near future, hopefully. Diversification with new players, expansion of scope, but also thinking about efficiency of those oligopolies and diversity, open market, diversity, it's always good.
Sven, this calls actually for the EU Commission to comment on this.
There's not a lot that I can add to what Fabrice said, maybe just two comments. The one is, as has been mentioned, we've also conducted a consultation on the audit sector. And as we said, we're looking into whether we should revise some of the rules that apply to the audit sector. But at the same time, we don't think the CSRD and establishing requirements for sustainability reporting is now the right time and place to completely reopen this debate, because we need to make quick progress on the sustainability. So our idea, and this is still something that is being discussed in the trialogue, in the negotiations around the CSRD, our idea has been that we would basically leave it to the companies themselves to decide whether they want to use a traditional auditor on the sustainability side, or whether they want to use another type of entity to look at at what they do there. This has been fairly controversial. Some have called for a strict split and that the financial auditors should not be involved in a sustainability audit. The member states are not very keen on this. It's been one of the big debates in this whole thing, and it is of course very much linked to, in a sense, two different issues. One is the audit market in general, and the other is who could audit sustainability information and who shouldn't, and do we want to fix the audit marking through this, or are we mostly interested in now getting this sustainability reporting off the ground? So I hope can do all of this, but the most important thing is that we now, from our perspective, that we get the legislative framework in place, and that we can start as soon as possible with the sustainability reporting properly audited, because it is very, very important to get this done now.
Thank you, Sven. That was very good answer. We had that final question from our friend from Greece, and he was, I think, complaining what we hear a lot in Germany, that the companies see a high burden and a high bureaucracy in all this information that they have to deliver. So it seems more like a burden, especially for small non-listed companies, understandable. So maybe we can hear something from the issue side. Lida, could you, do you think that's something you could comment?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jella. The company, the gentleman from the audience is referring to, and is an investment company. So it's a company, I suppose, that offers advice, investment advice to retail investors. So it's understandable that, you know, when investors go to this company to get investment advice, they have this at least a level of assurance that they are advised in their best own interest. So I know that, you know, in Greece and in many other countries, regulation is too much. Sometimes it's a burden. It's a burden to companies. Unfortunately, you know, it's something we have to bear if we want to distinguish ourselves. You know, good companies, honest companies that provide, you know, advice to the best interest of their customers and their investors, separate and differentiate themselves from, you know, companies who don't. So if you want to belong on this side, you know, on the good side of the river, I think you have to bear with the compliance regulation, complying with the regulations and with the compliance burdens, I'm afraid.
Thank you. And we have one final question from John, or a comment, yes. I don't know. Oh yeah, sorry, Saskia wanted to say something.
Yeah, I would like to add a little bit to this, to the remarks. I think there were two remarks. Jelle was saying in general, we're hearing a lot in Germany as well about costly, so more in general, not focused at SMEs. I wanted to say that one of our tasks as EFRAG is to undertake as well a cost benefit analysis. So that's so it's not only cost, it's also benefits, but it's certainly important. And it's not only the cost for preparers, it's also for other stakeholders. But I think the cost for preparers and the benefits are an important part of it. So, in order to do so, we will have partly outsourced, but we will also do some use tests, as we call it ourselves. So we have called them companies, and you can still actually register for that to do a use test with us. That means that you do part of the questionnaire, and then we have a workshop really to understand what are your costs. So I'm not aware if we have already Greek companies, but if you feel tempted by that, and we welcome you very much. The other thing I wanted to say and that's perhaps also for Sven, for SMEs, as part of the proposal for CSRD, there are SME standards foreseen. So they're actually in what they call the second set, as we refer to it. I don't know in the trilogue what requirements will remain, but the idea is that at least on a voluntary basis, SMEs could adopt SME standards, which would then obviously not be the same as the full set of standards. When I say it's in the second set, it means that we are currently working on it, but the public consultation, everything will be much later. Not much later, 6 or 8 months later.
Thank you, Saskia. John.
Yes, to my point of view, actually, it is. I know you think that it's probably overcrowded. That's an understatement, perhaps, but I would like to tell you that this is one of my favorite subjects. I would like to say that I deeply understand, and I agree with Ben Granch about his comments. Actually, we represent a similar organization in Greece. I'm tempted to make many questions, but I will suffice at just one. Well, in terms of legalese, you might say, how, and the question would be to Sven Gertner, and I would like also to Ben Granch. How do you think that the increase of liability to auditors would affect their readiness to apply to compensate in case? I will rephrase it. How would the increase of liabilities, liability amounts, would make audits more, let's say, more thorough, and would be detrimental? Would be good for the companies, or for the investors, or for the market, or for the industry? Second, how ready, but this goes to the second panel, the last panel, how ready is the insurance industry ready to compensate in case liability is found, in case like a wildcard in the EU case in Germany? Maybe this I should address it to Jelle also, or cases like Enron and Arthur Andersen, I think this is the company, back in 20 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So Ben, do you want to start with a question on the increase of liability?
Well, the first one is you spoke about legalese. I think what we want to say is there's research shows there's very diverse motivations for wanting to invest sustainably. And for the end investor, I would still say the only purpose is to make sure that we get what we want. We need meaningful input, but we don't want the industry to deter from what their raison d'etre is to make shareholder value. So we don't want to impose something that they cannot deliver. At the same time, we do say it shouldn't be a cop-out to say we cannot get the data. You can measure what you have. You can evaluate what you have not, And I'm sure there's going to be innovation to find out what exactly it is that we should be measuring. If you can report that in a way that we can all understand, then we're fine. This is not the first time we've been in this sort of panel. The consultation has been going on. The only thing that we keep saying is the legal requirement should be the basis, and the industry itself should enhance on that. We are not asking to impose something that makes it impossible to do business, but we do want something where we understand, are you actually doing something and doing what you're saying you're doing? So that's step one. And then the second thing, the jurisprudence, I don't think we can say a lot about it for the simple reason, as long as there is no framework in place and there is no redress in place, we can only refer to existing jurisprudence on cases as this. And there I would say it should be an asset to have a European level oversight, because I cannot speak for all the countries in Europe, but I know that in Belgium at least, it is not usually in favor of the end investor. So anything that helps us there, I'm all for it.
Yeah, regarding collective redress, I think, John, Better Finance is always fighting for that on the European level. So far, not as successful, but we never give up. We will push it forward. Sven, do you want to comment on that?
Maybe just a few words, and then maybe Fabrice should also say something when it comes to the liability of auditors. I mean, in this sustainability reporting framework, as was said before already, what we think is absolutely necessary is that this information is properly audited, so that it is reliable, that investors can trust it, that anyone who makes use of this information know that it is trustworthy. At the same time, we also know this is a new field, and I think a lot of expertise will have to be created over the next years. We've therefore, in our proposal, and I think that will also remain, in a sense, created some kind of phase-in mechanism, that it will take a few years until we move to limited and then reasonable assurance. We need to give the market time to adjust. We ourselves actually need to create the proper auditing standards for this field, which again has an international component where we also talk to international organizations. So yes, we of course need the auditors to play the role, or whatever entity does it. But at the same time, we also need to be mindful that it will take us some time to get to a situation where I think all the expertise is there, the standards are there, and the framework has been created in such a way that it can be properly applied.
May I add something?
Yes.
Trying to show the business case, we focus a lot on legal issues, on liabilities, etc., and reporting. But one thing we should bear in mind is that, keep in mind, is that all this information are gathered for the sake of the planet and for the sake of the society. So first of all, it should be material information, and then it will be reported, it will be judged, it will be assured, whatever you like, but it should be material.
Okay. Do you briefly want to comment, Fabrice?
Yeah, I have very little to add to what Sven said. And I think the Commission was very wise in creating this progressive entry into force and of responsibilities and liability, which is part of clearly the answer. Now, in your question, you clearly explained that liability should be strong enough to force the auditors to behave properly. But excessive liability, it's an entry barrier to new players in the market. So this diversity intention of creating new players might be discouraged if that liability is too high. Currently in Europe for audit, liability regimes are not harmonized. There are intentions that are harmonized in a recommendation, but it's national regimes that apply. Some have caps, others have a limited liability, or depending on the wrongdoing, it could be different. But I agree with you that to create more diversity, if there is excess or unlimited liability, it will reinforce the oligopoly. It's as simple as that. So there is really a need to maybe leave it to member states because it might be very complicated to harmonize, but nevertheless put in terms of relative size a cap that is sufficiently strong to force proper behavior, but not too strong to discourage new players entering the market. Not easy.
Thank you. Yeah, that's not easy at all. John, you addressed me directly because of the Wirecard case, and of course I would like to give you some comments on that. Yes, in Germany we saw some, in our view, some failures on the part of the auditor EY Germany. But we exactly have the problem that Fabrice is talking about. We have a limited liability in Germany for the auditors. So it's kind of difficult to go against the auditors, even on a legal basis. And this was actually also because that scandal really hit not only Germany, but I think all over Europe. The German government took this problem up and changed the law. And they increased the liability. They also increased the obligations of the auditor. We will see if this really helps in reality, but I think it's the right direction to go. So we are very curious to find out what the EU will do on this level.
We're also very curious to see, you read in the paper that there's a fund house that was under fire for its funds being marketed as sustainable and not really being sustainable. Very curious to see how that will play out.
DWS. Yeah.
I wasn't going to name.
Well, it's always Germany somehow. Sorry for that. No, but greenwashing is a big issue and DWS is a big issue in Germany, and it's not the end. So let's turn to the next round of questions. I still have some, I think, pretty good questions, and I would like to turn to Sven Entner, to the regulatory side. And we very often ask, why is the EU Commission so determined to publish their own standards now? Why don't we wait for the ISSB or even do something together with the ISSB? Why are we in such a hurry? So Sven, maybe you could comment a little bit on that.
Well, I think on the issue why we're in such a hurry, I already said a few words at the beginning. We're dealing with a very pressing real world problem, and we need to find a solution very quickly. And sustainability standards are not the only solution, but I think they're an important part to help us move to a more sustainable economy. On the question, why don't we wait? Why don't we just wait for international standards to be agreed first and then move? I think it's the same answer. We're all in favor of international cooperation and trying to find standards that work together. But at the same time, first of all, I think we just don't have the time because these processes take a lot of time. There's also different political directions in different jurisdictions. The view that the EU has taken to establish very clear goals for 2030 to move to climate neutrality by 2050 is unfortunately not shared by everyone. Other jurisdictions have set themselves lower goals or no goals at all. And quite frankly, we cannot wait for everyone to move to the same possibly lowest common denominator. We need to move now and we need to make a difference. So we're all in favor of trying to come to standards internationally that are as closely aligned as possible. But at the same time, in the EU, we have, I think, for very, very good reasons, taken the decision that we need to move very fast in terms of fighting climate change. And for that also, we need the right standards in place. So the industry has the information to do that. And we simply cannot wait for everyone to also see the light. Thank you.
Thank you, Sven. This was very clear. I would like to take the opportunity and address Saskia directly. I mean, we do not want to discuss now shareholder versus stakeholder approach or double materiality or simple.
I will refrain from that.
No problem. But I think it would be very useful if you could explain us a little bit the approach of EFRAG compared to the ISSB, because it's for the investor side, maybe not as easy to understand.
I will do my best. So I said already in this proposal for CSRD, which we hope will be still adopted under the French presidency, EFRAG is identified as a technical advisor to the European Commission, preparing draft European sustainability reporting standards. So I'm saying draft standards because actually it's the Commission who is the standard setter and decides on the final standards in the form of delegated acts that would directly apply then to those companies within the scope. That brings me immediately to the difference to your question. What's the difference in approach? Well, as I said, the role of EFRAG and the draft standards are defined in the proposal for a CSRD. So that means that the scope to whom they apply is defined there. So which companies, and we have to see then what will be the end result. There is also the timeline that is determined there. So you may have seen that we have this public consultation on these 13 exposure drafts ending on the 8th of August in the middle of your holidays, and still we hope that you respond to it. But this is a counting back from making the standards available by the end of June 2023. The Commission needs our input by mid-November of this year. Then the other thing is the topics, the other form of scope. The topics addressed are defined by the CSRD. So, and that covers both environmental, social, and governance. So not only climate and not only the general principles. Because some say, why are you not doing that? Well, only that, and why not phased? And we said, well, we have to work within the scope. Now we have to wait, of course, what is the end result. And also the CSRD goes also a bit in detail on the topic, so what to address. The other thing that is said in the proposal is that all the existing European legislation has to be taken into account. I mean, I think next to me referred to the taxonomy, to the sustainable finance disclosure regulation, but many others as well. There is a whole list in it. But it also says that, and of course, double materiality is a difference as well that comes in. But I will not go into detail on that one because that's probably too long. But the double materiality actually makes that it's also involves, like any directive, a wider range of stakeholders than only financial reporting. And I think that's also an important difference with the work of the ISSB, that we have to take into account and be representative of all stakeholders. So that includes civil society. But the proposal says as well to work and to base ourselves on what is there, so and take into account the international development. So that's certainly one thing that we have to do. And that was not only now in the proposal for CSD, when we got actually the mandate, the 2 mandates by Executive Vice President Dombrovskis. In that mandate, it was already said that, and there was a list of initiatives that we had to take into account. By that time, the ISSB was not yet in existence, so they were not in that list. So we have actually, there is close cooperation, and like Sven was saying, the pace is different, the scope is different, but there is close cooperation. So we are not in competition, we are not enemies, we're sitting here together in a panel. Sven referred to the jurisdictional working group where the jurisdiction come together. We will also, we have also bilateral contacts to make sure that there is alignment. I'm told I cannot use the word alignment anymore, Sven, because it's not clear who aligns to who. So interoperability is the difficult word that is apparently to be used. So it's really important. And you see as well the 3 standards or the exposure drafts, I have to say, that are out on climate. They are all based on the TCFD. There are numerous comparisons that have been published, 2 already last week, I think, but I don't know how many I've seen. We have done our self-comparisons. So they're on our website. They are part of the appendices. So you can see what are the differences. Some differences are coming, say, from simple things like the directives that we have to respect. A very simple thing is that the difference between undertaking and entity, well, basically there is no difference, but undertaking is the word that is used in the directives and entity is the IFRS ISSB word. So it's, some of the differences will remain. So, but there is close cooperation. But the difference is, the wider the scope, the everything. So I think I've used more than I was allowed to.
No, you are always allowed to. But I'm very impressed that you sit next to each other. And I will take the opportunity and also address Lee.
I mean, you do not always have the chance to ask somebody representing ISSB. So maybe I just turn it the other way around and ask you, could you please explain us the approach of the ISSB? As far as we understand, it's limited on the issue of climate, but what happens with S&G at ISSB? So maybe you could give us some more comments on this topic, please.
Love to. And if I could just conclude on that last discussion, and I think Sven and Saskia really covered that particularly well, the challenges that all of us have. But at the end of the day, particularly when we're talking about climate, climate is a global issue and it needs a global response. So we need Europe, we need the Americas, we need Africa, and we need Asia all in somehow to come together as best we can. To your question, I need to bring a little bit of clarity to that, because we've issued 2 exposure drafts at the moment. And yes, one of those is on climate, because that was where the demand was when we went through our consultations. Please address climate first. But also in that, there was a real sense, do not stop with climate. And so the second exposure draft that we've released is around general requirements. And so here, what we are asking corporates to do is to actually report where there are material matters, sustainability matters, not just on climate. It could be outside of the E, it could be in the S and the G, when they're material matters, where they're in terms of either challenges or opportunities, then those disclosures are required to be made. So it is trying to capture first up the full range of sustainability matters. And for those accountants in the room, and there mightn't be many, but I'm one of them, if you cast your mind back many years, the IASB issued what was known as IAS 1 right at the start of what it was doing. And this general requirements is somewhat akin to trying to do that. In a way, it's to move ahead with disclosures outside of climate, but in a place where there hasn't been other standards or exposure drafts already made by the new board, and that will still come. So in a way, it's trying to capture that piece at the moment. So climate first, but not just climate.
That was clear. Thank you very much. Mike, I think this has also consequences for the field of practice of accountants. And maybe you can give us a short impression on how is this changing the practice of accountants, and how do you respond to these possible potential new requirements?
So the simple answer is yes, as you'd expect. I think it is creating a great deal of change. And even though we're talking about reporting today, it's about much more than that. And it's about the role that finance professionals play across all the activities within an organization, supporting business models and strategy, data, internal audit, and so on. It really takes in every aspect of the role of a professional accountant. And that's why bodies like ACCA and others are putting so much effort into thinking about how we can equip our members with the skills that they're going to need to operate effectively in this kind of an environment. So we've designed a new competency framework, which has got sustainability right at the heart of it, and we're driving that through in our training programs, as I touched on earlier on. I think our sense is that there is a great deal of awareness amongst the finance professional constituency. So we've done research in this area that concluded that 95% of our members really recognise the kind of opportunities that this new agenda presented for them, but only 54% of them thought they actually have the skills to deliver against this. And that really, I think, articulates the challenge that we've got to address. One point I would pick up, I think is very important, it was touched on very briefly earlier on, but I think it's worthwhile thinking about, is that at the heart of all of this is data. And it's whether organizations are set up to identify and gather the data that they're going to need. And then if that data is in the kind of state and it's produced in a reliable way so that it will support the kind of assurance activities that we were talking about earlier on. So that, again, I think is a challenge we need to focus on. And just trying to keep the answer brief, I guess the ball lands back in the court of those who train accountants and provide them with the skills that they need to be effective. And in fact, to lead in this area, because I do think that the finance professional has got a really strong role to play in advancing this whole agenda. So There's a challenge for each individual professional body. There's a challenge for the profession as a whole, I think, actually, to put their arms around this agenda. And so that all the different aspects of work that finance professionals do can contribute to the agenda that Sven laid out, I think, quite compellingly about how important this all is and how it needs to move at speed.
Thank you. Ben, I think I would love to turn again to the investor side, because you mentioned greenwashing, you mentioned transparency and all of this, which is very important for the investor side. But what are the key elements for non-financial reporting that you would love to see for the retail investor and that he is looking for or she is looking for in the corporate sustainability reporting document? What do you want to have there?
I'm going to disappoint you by not saying this particular data point, because I said before, any data point that is useful. But if I can turn back to 2 earlier questions that may frame a little bit how we feel about this. What is the urgency? If you had asked me this 6 months ago, I would have said, I don't understand what the urgency is, but we have been caught up by geopolitical events in the sense that, you know how they say that culture is just a very thin layer of varnish on top of the Barbary. I think as soon as the war started, it would seem that sustainability is also a fairly thin layer. And if the European government has now ordered fracking gas for the next 15 years to come to Europe, then I say, then what is the value of this? And that is the urgency, I would say. As long as there's no framework in place, then it's very hard to stop such decisions. So a data point or many data points that help us to say, this is good, this is not good, that is what we want. The second thing I wanted to say earlier, somebody made a comment, I think it was Jean or gentleman over there, to say Europe is leading the way on sustainability. I think we do not have the time to be complacent. I was lucky to be a part of an economic mission to the United Arab Emirates. They have the money, they have the power, they have the political will to make very quick strides. I think right now Europe has maybe on a conceptual level still the leadership position. We want to keep that in place because we can help the rest of the world follow suit. But if we do not hurry up to put something in place, then we will have to contend with other systems that may not be to our liking as well. So tie that all together. Financial education is the key requirement for me for any system that you're going to put in place, because in the short term, we might say that